Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you happen to be across the world today. Thank you so much for attending this session on how to prepare yourself for this new era of AI using Microsoft Copilot. My name is Matt Wade, and I'm a Microsoft MVP coming to you from the East Coast of the United States. And I'm joined today by a fellow MVP, my buddy and friend, Nuno Silva. Nuno, want to give yourself a quick introduction?
Thank you, Matt. I'm Nuno Arias Silva. I'm from Portugal. I'm also Microsoft MVP. I work at Ineto as a solution architect manager. Thank you.
And I am also known for anything as a co-founder of Jump to 365. We put out a lot of videos, infographics, things like that. If you've ever seen the periodic table of Microsoft 365, that is my original invention. And then the web app is me and my co-founder have worked on that. But today's session, we're going to be talking about how to get ready for Microsoft 365 Copilot. Not Power Platform Copilot, not GitHub Copilot, not any other Copilots other than the Microsoft 365 Copilot. And we're excited to talk about it today after some really exciting presentations today at Microsoft Ignite. But before we get into the nitty-gritty details, we do want to say a special thanks to our three moderators who are here today. So you are watching this via the new Microsoft Teams Town Hall experience. So take a look at the new Q&A, well, not new Q&A, but the Q&A feature that's built into Microsoft Teams Town Hall. So Sean, Mike, and Michael will be there to help out if you have questions. If any of those questions bubble up, they will pass them over to us where we'll take them on. But Nuno and I are paying more attention to the content and presenting today. So thanks very much to them. Thanks to also to the people in the background, Olivia, Laurent, and a number of other folks on the Ignite team that we've been working with. We're super excited to be here. Now, what is this? One of these Learn Live sessions. So Learn Live is essentially us kind of running through what our Microsoft Learning Path modules that you'll find on the Microsoft Learn website. So today we're going to cover these two modules. The first one is implementing Microsoft 365 Copilot. And the second is examining the data security and compliance for Microsoft 365 Copilot. It sounds a lot scarier than it is. I'm not so much hardcore on the developer or administrator side. I'm much more on the user side. And even this stuff makes lots of sense to me because a lot of it is change management and information management, getting prepped not just to turn on licenses, but to actually work with your people on making the content good so you can actually move forward with this. So I'm going to keep it kind of quick on this slide. These are the topics we're going to talk about, and I want to kind of point out what to expect here today. So the first thing really is we're going to be talking a lot about cleaning and preparing your data, making sure that it is secure, making sure that permissions are right, making sure that there's not a whole bunch of extra information out there that doesn't need to be there, because Copilot is this magical black box that's going to say, hey, here's the stuff that I'm given. Based on that, here's the stuff I'm going to give out. So you want to make sure that your information is good. We're going to cover how to assign licenses. We'll talk a little bit about some hot topics with licensing, especially pricing and availability. And we're also going to talk about managing change throughout this process. So I mentioned earlier, make sure to check out the Q&A. That is where you're going to want to check in, say hi, and drop in any questions. And the moderators will be working on those questions, try to answer them if they can. If there's any really notable ones or sizzling ones, they will pop them up for us to take a look at and join in for the discussion on this. So based on that, I'm going to pass this over to Nuno, and he's going to get started.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. Now we are going to do an introduction about how to implement Microsoft 365 Copilot. This introduction is to understand a little more about how we can leverage the organizations to be more secure, the way where we are putting a tool that are going to search everywhere on the tablet. And to understand more this kind of tool, these capabilities about to create a drafts, to using Copilot to find information during the search, we need to understand more how to prepare your organization, your company, your customers, depending what role are you facing, to better way to understand the goals and what are the barriers to reach the final goal. And to prepare for the Copilot, we need to understand the prerequisites for the Copilot to start the implementation process. The launch for the Copilot, as Matt has said, the part of change management is very important, not just the part of technical part, the preparation tips, the necessary tools, and how to implement correctly, not just have the license and assign the license and its life. First of all, we need to understand in this graph how it works, the architecture. For example, the user can do the prompt and goes to the Copilot, then goes to Microsoft Graph, and it's your contacts, it's your data that goes to Microsoft Graph. Then it post-processing and goes to the large language model. No data from your organization are going to the large language model. Then it comes back to you to give the response to the users. All this process, just to an overview how it will work to give the best response based on your content and in your tenant based on your context. And to be and to get ready to the code to the Copilot, we need to understand the apps they are going to use this model. You can use Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, locally install it directly to use the Copilot. Your ID account requires your authentication, your OneDrive, the new Outlook for Windows, Microsoft Teams, and also Microsoft Tool. This is the tools that you can reach the Copilot. And how to prepare your data for Copilot searches.
So Nuno, I don't know about you, but there's a lot of people in my world that are not going to be happy that to get the new Copilot, they're going to have to also use the new Outlook for Windows, which very big change for a lot of people. I totally get it, but it's a major change. So the next topic we're going to talk about is basically how Copilot indexes the information in your system. So Nuno showed off that graphic there, which is, by the way, is a fantastic graphic. If you were watching the keynotes earlier, there was an animated version of that. There's a lot of lines in the static version, but basically it means that the large language models, right, the Copilot magic, is not really ever touching the data in your system. But the data in your system is still the data in your system that's already there or that gets put there. And it's already being indexed by SharePoint, by Microsoft Search, by other systems tools within the Microsoft 365 world. So the thing that you need to be aware of here is essentially be prepared for the amount of content that you're going to have to clean up, right? This is an information management question. If Copilot, this magical all-knowing thing, is going to go out and essentially log all the information that you have access to, and you're going to go ask it a question or make it go prepare something, maybe make a PowerPoint slideshow based on existing information about some Excel spreadsheets and some Word documents that identify what this project is you're working on. You want it to be right. Now, I've heard in the past, a few people at Microsoft have said things like Copilot will be usefully wrong. You don't necessarily want that, right? Of course, I think the internet has proven that when something wrong comes up, the best way, it's the best way to actually get somebody to correct it or include correct information. But if you're not familiar with information management practices, this term rot, which is redundant, outdated, and trivial, that is a very key component of the quality of the information that you have in your system. I say in your system, very generic phrasing there. Your SharePoint files, your OneDrive files, your emails, your Teams chats, all of this stuff is going to be accessible to Copilot. So if it's going to have access to a lot of wrong information or outdated information, then you're not going to have a great day when Copilot comes back with information that's based on things that are not necessarily right. Now, I'm assuming, and I haven't asked the question, but I'm assuming it's going to put more weight on things that are more recent, right? If you have an information or an email back and forth for 3 days with somebody, the stuff that comes out of the later emails are more accurate, probably because you're concluding that conversation than the information that first started the conversation. A few other things you can be looking at. Tagging keywords. If you can essentially add thing like hashtags or metadata within SharePoint that can relate things back to each other, that helps Copilot go find stuff and find things that are related. There was a good recommendation here about standardizing file names. Don't use acronyms or initialisms when you don't have to, because Copilot, while it's very smart, may not be able to make that connection between the full version of that phrasing and the initialism that you use. Now, I would say there's some arguments to be made that maybe acronyms can be good and initialisms can be good. They shorten file names, they shorten folder names, they shorten URLs because there's a URL limit within SharePoint. And then consider your multiple versions. So not so much version history, right? SharePoint has version history built in, but the version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4, draft 5, draft 7, draft 12, final .docx. No, but seriously, this is really the final one, .docx, those types of things. If you have all those earlier versions, those are going to have a little weight. Even if it's small weight, it's still going to be weight. So this is actually probably the majority of the work you're going to be looking at, is how to make sure that your information is sort of accurate and that people are being hygienic within the system that they're being given. That is not a human tendency to keep things clean, orderly, and in shape, right? So that's something that it's not just about turning on the switch for Copilot. It's about making sure that people can actually get good data and good answers out of it. There's a few other tips in here that come from the learning module that include logical folders and sites, having a good site architecture. Now, if you have a very sprawling information architecture that kind of built organically, especially after the pandemic started in 2020, it's not easy to fix that. But that doesn't mean it's the end of the world. But if you can make some improvements here and there, those are going to be great. And that includes this concept of fewer repositories. But really, the big picture thing that you want to keep in mind here is that this isn't something magical that's going to correct things that might be wrong in your system. It is really going to be that phrase that we all love: garbage in, garbage out. That might come out a little prettier, but that doesn't mean it's going to be good. That's what you want to keep in mind.
Okay, Matt. And now let's talk about how to protect your Copilot data with Microsoft 365 and Azure security tools. First of all, we need to understand that Copilot, as Matt said, will reach all of your data that you have access. Then we need to have the security, the compliance, the privacy to be a responsible AI. That's the reason that we need to protect your data with the tools that are available on your Office 365. First of all, we need to understand the overall concerns on the organizations that are personal information or just internal or confidential. You need to understand better to access reviews, which documents, emails, or other contents that are sensitive or not to be reachable to anyone to use the content. Try to tiny permissions and the access to only authorized users have access. That's the better way that you can close the gaps on your organization. If you're not familiar with these kind of tools or not implemented yet, it's the time to use it before implement Copilot. Try to validate the access and the views about a survey. You can interview users and to test it. test functionality to confirm a few users. We show later the better path to do your delivery project of Copilot, and you need to implement Azure Information Protection to classify and to encrypt documents, emails, dependent your sensitivity. You can create policies. You are going to create labels on the documents, on emails, on your SharePoint, on your OneDrive, wherever your information is. To create sensitivity labels, for example, you can create a sensitive label that tags the content. For example, your company name with the word confidential near a percentage that are near the words, and then you can classify that document or email as confidential. Try to understand the data loss prevention to identify your sensitive information that you want to preserve or you want to be on top of the mind that could be reached by Copilot and the end user will use it or not. The retention policies, depending the kind of organization. For example, if you are in a public organization, depending the country, you have legal obligations to retain the content about 5 years or 10 years. Not just the content, the audit and everything. That is a legal permission that you need to retain.
Also, before you go on to the next slide,
yeah.
I wanted to ask you a question here. So as I've been thinking about this with the information management perspective, right, the don't have bad data, I feel like retention policies are actually going to be an enemy, because if you are required to keep something for 7 years, which is a pretty standard timeline in the United States, at least, if something's 6.5 years old and Copilot is going after it, and especially if people are using it, I don't know, more recently, and it gets bumped up in the trending view, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think retention is going to have a fight with AI?
I don't know, because you can also take some retentions to create another tag depending on time. You also can create that. You can create, for example, a confidential but archive is another label. If you, for example, you need to retain for 10 years, but you want to reach out only the last 5 years, you create another label and just do that an archive to won't be searchable by Copilot, for example.
That's a great idea. Yeah. Your formal repository being there for legal reasons, but not for productivity reasons, essentially. Yeah. Have you worked in your career on with organizations on applying AIP and sensitivity labels and DLP and things like that?
Yes, a lot.
So I have limited experience. I'm more of a collaboration guy and less a security and less of a records guy. But this is a project.
Yes, this is a huge project. First of all, here with the rules of Europe, of the protection of the rules, we need to understand, first of all, what are the legal rules that we need to apply and what are the compliance with the DPO of the company. And we need to create a match, create a schema to understand how can we label regarding the type of information and the company. If there are, for example, the numbers of the credit cards is obvious, but for example, if you have your information for your company, your number of fiscal number. For example, we can create a normal label that if you put just two fiscal numbers could not be understood as a data loss. But if you put a third number in the same page or the same document, the label will be raised. That could be a data loss because normally you just have just two fiscal numbers on an invoice, for example, not three fiscal numbers. That we need to understand, to test it, and then the part of change management of the company, not just to implement the part of technical and the legal part, also the part of change management to help the people inside and also to the people how to are going to understand if they are need to share to outside and need to go to another level to an approval or not. Because when you implement, for example, information protection to an email or to a document, you can share it externally to Microsoft with anyone in the world. And only that person that receives that email will receive another email with a code to open the content. But if that person is not the final person that needs that content, could be a problem.
Yeah,
That's an example.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun for a lot of people who may not have very strategic or formal processes for this kind of stuff. And you know, there are lots of people out there that do this work, and you want to probably reach out if you're new to it, because if you switch this on, you may regret it later on. It's worse than just turning SharePoint Teams on and just allowing sprawl. This is going to be some pretty big stuff.
Yeah. And also to continue, we need to understand, for example, the conditional access policies based on SharePoint sites and conditions, user location, device, or network. You can implement, for example, the Intune to do also the conditional access policies for type of device, if it's owner for the company or not. The privilege identity management, you can configure just-in-time admin access and enforce principle of this privilege. For example, the best practice is if you are a small organization, there are just a few admins, don't use your primary account as an admin. You can also implement PIN to elevate yourself, but not actually you are with all admin privileges all the time. And to have all these, automate access reviews, user assignments, revoke permissions that no longer requires. If you are a partners, a contractors, we need to understand who have access, where, and when. That's the part of the cube of all the information. Also, you can understand more to monitor your organization using Defender for Cloud Apps, to also enforce access and session controls if they are using third-party tools, to sharing using other tools and close the gaps on your organization. And also in Endpoint Manager to control applications, the settings, the data on devices. For example, when you share a document, you can review that document, for example, just have access in a device of your organization based on the label that I was told before, for example, confidential, on just on devices of your organization. And for example, if you are working from another device that are not part of your organization, you don't have access to those documents. That's the way to better understand the knowledge. Okay.
All right. So that brings us to the hot topic of the day. That would be licensing. I have a feeling most people are probably not 100% on board with the licensing model that's available right now. And one thing I failed to say at the beginning, I meant to, was that Nuno and I are both Microsoft MVPs. That stands for Most Valuable Professional. I don't know if I qualify really in that terminology, but the big thing I always like to point out when Microsoft shows such love to folks like us, especially to speak at events like this, is to clarify that I don't work for Microsoft. Nuno doesn't work for Microsoft. As a result, we're allowed to have an opinion. So we generally share those opinions. And the licensing concept on this one is one where a lot of people have a lot of strong opinions. I've checked into the Q&A. That is like the most common question already coming in. So what I can tell you is that in preparation for this session, Nuno and I have had very unique access to the product group behind Copilot. They're very intrigued with what we're going to talk about, how we're going to present this. We're both very, very excited about this product. I mean, like, this is a game changer. Microsoft Teams, love it. This blows it out of the water, most likely. I can't tell you from personal experience because I've never used it before. None of us, very few of us, have actually used Microsoft 365 Copilot. Many of us have used Bing Chat, which has been rebranded as Copilot or Microsoft Copilot within Microsoft 365. Anyway, the point is here, when it comes to licensing, the big thing is that right now it is available. It is generally available based on the technical definition of general availability that Microsoft has. I don't necessarily love that because I didn't know the technical definition until about 2 weeks ago. That Copilot is available to Enterprise, E3, Microsoft 365 customers. Sorry, E3 and E5 customers. However, there is a 300-seat minimum. So if you're in the United States, that is $108,000 US per year to just turn yourself on. So that is a not really accessible threshold for a lot of people right now. So the amount of organizations that are able to use Copilot is very small. You will read in documentation that the Microsoft 365 Business Standard and Business Premium is also available. However, that's still in an early access program state. That's EAP is what that's known as. So that's an invite-only state. I have no information, not even like NDA or private information that have been shared with me about any forthcoming plans to bring the 300 down or to make standard and premium available anytime soon, basically outside of the EAP. So this is the current status. The status as I know it. The status is Microsoft. Multiple people in Microsoft. So just know that it's coming. Think about the fact that GPT-4, 3 came out about a year ago, and now 4 is the underlying technology behind a lot of this stuff. So things move fast. Microsoft licensing is never easy. This is one of the easier ones, to be frank. But this is the current status of Microsoft licensing, direct from the horse's mouth via our mouths. So this is 100% accurate, and that 300-person minimum seat is a requirement currently. Once you do get the ability to have Microsoft 365 Copilot within your tenant, or if you're one of those lucky organizations that has 100+ K ready to just throw out there and invest in this type of technology, and you have those licenses, it is a very easy process. Again, I mentioned earlier, I'm not a developer, so PowerShell is available. I mentioned at the bottom, but really this is, to me, through the GUI, going through the admin center and applying this license just like you would the E5 or E3 that you have, or the Power Platform licensing that you want to put out there for people, or the Visio or project licensing. Very, very simple. Probably not surprised that that's the case. So it's very easy to do. I mentioned earlier as well that this is not Copilot in general that we're talking about today. So these processes, these requirements apply only to the Microsoft 365 Copilot. So this is the Copilot experience you're going to see in Microsoft Teams, in Outlook, in Word, in PowerPoint, in Excel. Power Platform is its own beast. its own product group, like almost its own organizational chart within Microsoft for that matter. So there are already Copilots working in Power Apps and Power Automate that I've seen, and they are free. Not all of them, not going to promise you that they're free in every situation. GitHub has its own, Bing has its own, and now it's called just Copilot. But what we're talking about today is just the Microsoft 365 Copilot, which is what you're going to see in all of those Office apps. This is related to licensing, a question that popped up just now. How will Copilot work for Power BI? We see that there are already certain features enabled, even though we don't have Copilot enabled. Will it still be like that? Can you share any documents on how Copilot will improve Power BI? As most of them talk M365 Enterprise Suite and not Power BI. So I did mention Power Platform. So Power BI is part of the Power Platform. That's Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Virtual Agents. Oops, that's now called Copilot Studio. And Power BI. Trying to think what else is AI Builder, a few other things are within the Power Platform, which is all part of the Dynamics 365 family. Now, I don't use Dynamics, but that doesn't mean that its offspring, that Power Platform, doesn't affect Office 365, Microsoft 365. So Power BI does have Copilot enablement, but it has its own either licensing or enablement process. So those are separate. So this session's is specifically on Microsoft 365. But like I said, like Power Apps already is showing off Copilot to me within a general, non-early access, no special, anything situation. So those are going to have Copilots. GitHub has Copilots. The Admin Center is going to have a Copilot. There's going to be Copilots all over the place. You get a Copilot, you get a Copilot, you get a Copilot. And most of them are probably going to be related to the experience that you're in. So consider the context. This question is about Power BI. Don't ask about Copilot. Ask about Copilot and Power BI, and go look for the documentation that will have information about that. And of course, Power BI being one of the strongest, I think, use cases for Copilot, because when you show a bunch of dashboards, that requires design skills, not common, good design skills at least. The concept of being able to take lots of data and boil them down to very discrete points and like KPIs, key performance indicators, that kind of thing. But in this case, Power BI, if you can just say what were the sales for blah blah blah, location area for last year, like why do you need a dashboard any longer, right? That's fantastic. And in fact, if you already have it in Excel, why do it anywhere else if you're already paying for it? The one thing I lacked, I didn't mention explicitly, by the way, is the the Microsoft 365 Copilot licensing is $30 per month. Per person per month. That's where I came up with that $108,000 per year. If you take that is an annual subscription, even though they reference it by a monthly cost. So just be aware of that. So turning Copilot on is the easy part. Like that was literally 2 slides, one talking about the hot topic of the day and the other how to get into the admin center and add somebody via a license. The next big thing after the get your data ready, which that phrasing is very short, but doing a lot of heavy lifting. The next one is change management. And the recommendation here is to work through a Copilot Center of Excellence. Now, this Copilot Center of Excellence is probably something you do want to consider across all of the experiences you have. So while the licensing section just now talked about just the Microsoft 365 Copilot, not the Power Platform Copilot, not the GitHub Copilot, not the Admin Center Copilot, the Center of Excellence probably wants to just consider Copilot as a brand, because to the general user, it is just Copilot. It doesn't matter to them where they're going from to get there, because they're just trying to get their real job done. This is my real job. This might be your real job to talk about these nuances, but the people out there in the accounting group or the engineering group or the sales group, that is not their real job. They don't need to know these nuances. So if you're not familiar with the COE, this is essentially where you bring people together, almost like a champions concept, early access to try things out, test it, see what happens, and move through the tests and kind of prove all of those use cases that you might have out there. Examine, get feedback, see what happens, and just test essentially. So you want to definitely try that out. Try to find those people out there who are tech savvy and want to play. They like to toy, they like to tinker. Try to get them in there. Entice them with early access. Don't roll it out until those people get it first, because that gives them an incentive to come and join you and help you out, because this is your work that they're helping with. It's not their work. You are trying to get it out there, but you need to prove the concept first. Try to accelerate that adoption with all those lessons learned, with all those champions that you have that can say, wow, I had early access to this, and they can be talking about it at the lunch table with their colleagues and say, this is so cool. I can't wait until you guys get it. I don't know why they're taking so long. Make it a bit of a carrot on a stick kind of thing. It also gives you an opportunity to set up the governance ahead of time, but then get feedback. And I will say, I've written a lot of governance in my day. I don't really know what to write for governance for this because I don't think anybody knows what to do yet with this, right? This is a black box. It's essentially magic, and there's not a great way to. I don't want to say there's not a great way to control it. Like Microsoft is already putting, controls in place that make sure that it's not going to go off and spew a bunch of profanities at you or, do something bad, essentially. But that doesn't mean that you necessarily know the outcomes of the questions that your colleagues, your peers, your users are going to actually be pushing through. The improved ROI, get people to talk about what they were using it for. Make those, showcase those success stories and those ideas, those tips and tricks that otherwise wouldn't pop up. And really just kind of have those people meet with you on a regular basis, talk about what you're using it for, how you're using it, because it's going to be a paradigm shift for a lot of people. I think there's going to be a big gap between those people that are early adopters and those people that are not adopting at all, the laggards on the change management curve. And this is going to be a real big one where those laggards may very well be lagged behind for a long time, if not the rest of their careers, because there's a bit of it just kind of clicks in your head for those that get it, and for those that don't, may not, and that's okay. But you do have to kind of work through that kind of situation. So if you're not familiar with rolling out a new process, system, tool, this is a pretty standard concept that they have out there. AdCar is one of those tool sets that you might want to look at if you don't have a lot of familiarity with this. But start out with that pilot, run through your evaluation, make a plan, put it out there, and then push your full deployment. Make sure you're taking feedback, put out surveys, ask for regular weekly meetings or something where people come in and talk about their success stories, their challenges, their just would you use this? Is this something, do all the videos that you saw in the keynote really represent what people in real life use this for? Are they really going to come back and say, I can't live without this any longer? I will take this over the pizza, the free pizza that I would otherwise be offered, like was mentioned in one of the keynotes earlier. So if you're not familiar with these change management processes, definitely start looking into them. Like I mentioned, AdCar is one that's probably the best known change management process out there. But you do really want to get people kind of talking about this and understanding what it is as they can start building it. The one last thing I'll say on this slide is usually in an AdCar or change management or rollout process like this, there's a lot of documentation, there's a lot of Reddit posts, there's a lot of feedback, there's a lot of discussion online that talks about how to best use the thing that you're trying to roll this out or that you're trying to roll out. This isn't going to have that. This is a first of its kind example of rollout to everybody at an organization in their face, right? ChatGPT has been out for a while, right? Bing Chat has been out now for 9 months maybe. GPT came out last year. But that's really, I realized that, OpenAI now has, I think they said 100 million monthly active users of GPT at this point, which is fantastic. But there's 7.5 billion people in the world, right? I'm not a monthly active user of that generally. Maybe I am actually, but not weekly. I'm not a 1 weekly active user for that service. I might use it once in a month every so often, or like 10 times in a day, but that's one monthly active user in that situation. And I'm pretty techie when it comes to it. You are going to probably find or be the first person to find something great or bad about this service as you roll this out to your people. The limited rollout, the testing process that Microsoft had, the invite-only access program that they had going and continue to have going, means that the exposure has actually been reasonably small. So you might be one of the first to find something, to make those tips and tricks. This is your opportunity to share that information with the world, not just internally within your organization. So as you're doing this stuff, keep in mind that you're breaking new ground probably. If you ever think about the, what terms are the first time that anybody's ever searched this term on Google kind of thing, there's going to be a lot of those in this service. So keep that in mind and, I think big picture, it's going to be really helpful to share this stuff openly out on the internet and in discussion forums, not just internally, but definitely internally, but also in the outside world. Save your data. Don't inform people what your internal processes are, give away IP or anything like that. But you're going to be breaking new ground, most likely on this, just statistically speaking. So it's a pretty exciting thing and just something to look forward to. So with that, Nuno, I'm going to pass this back off to you.
Thank you, Matt. Now we are going to look how to examine how Copilot use your proprietary data. Remember that Copilot will have access what you have access. Just I see some questions over here. You just need to have view access, not just editing or write. If you have access, Copilot will have access because we'll bring the contacts from you. To what? User documents, emails, calendar, chats, wherever that you have access on Microsoft 365. That's why you need to implement a tenant permissions and to just enable access to each users. To understand a little more where are, for example, and how it works. You will be a user that goes through, for example, Teams, and you go to the Copilot and related components, and you ask for Copilot something from Teams. They are from groups, they have access to files, to users, to message, and also, for example, to OneDrive and recordings. For example, now the recordings are saved on your OneDrive. The Copilot will go to your OneDrive, see the recordings of a meeting, for example. There, where are going, for example, the SharePoint, the team sites that you have access to, the group mailboxes, the user mailboxes that you have access. That's really neat to time your information depending what you have access. And for example, also, if you are going to examine, for example, the chat, the Viva Engage groups are also all connected. All these are all connected using Microsoft Graph that connects everything to bring to Copilot the information to the end user at the end. Okay? Now, we need to see that you are going to use Microsoft Graph, the index Copilot, for example, to access Exchange mailboxes, OneDrive, Teams data. It's your data, not Microsoft data. It's in your tenant. Microsoft boundary, it's your data that stays in your tenant, and Microsoft continues to don't have access to your data. Just have the contacts and go to the large language model to understand how are you going to search and how will reach and to give your best answer based on your needs. And understand the boundaries that Microsoft using, and all data is encrypted, and you have more information on data privacy and so on. And Microsoft has announced on the launch of the Copilot that, for example, the rights of the data and copyrights are your own. Okay? What you create are yours within your tenant, within your organization. Okay? That's really good to understand what are the boundaries from Microsoft to the organizations. Okay, to examine how Copilots protect sensitive business data. the permissions, the model that can help to understand the leak of users or tenants, the access controls, as we have told before several times, only access the data that each of you at least view permissions to access the services. Of course, Microsoft has isolated instances that is logical, isolated by tenant and encrypted. Wherever your data are in transit or in rest is totally encrypted. And that encryptions, your data are, for example, at the data centers and so on, BitLocker, the TLS, IPsec, all these are encrypted. Okay? And the compliance boundary is when you ask the information to Copilot and you wait for the response. However, if you are an administrator, you can choose to let the data out of the boundary or not. For example, if you are going to query Bing Enterprise or not. No training data are used. Copilot, when you search within your tenant, nothing goes to Microsoft with any customer data, nor prompts, nor training to improve. The large language model or the new Turbo from the new model from Turbo, they are new models that Copilot will connect to them. Microsoft will not use your data to training. Also, responsible AI to understand the responsible development, privacy, security, transparency, and so on. And how Microsoft understands security, like threat monitoring, vulnerability assessments, and data protection controls. These are general. And for example, for you that are on E5 parts that you have all the part of the compliance and all the data protection that Microsoft has, and the certifications, for example, here in Europe, the most important is the EU modern clauses that no data goes out from Europe to United States, and Microsoft is continuing audited by third party to give you the best insurance that the service is where it is. Okay, then to understand the Copilot meets regulation compliance mandates.
Yeah, I kind of want to say, representing the entire United States here, we're still kind of offended by this whole "you can't send your data to us because we're not trustworthy" thing. But we'll bygones and whatnot. So we'll talk a little bit about compliance here. So this is not my cup of tea. Typically, I mentioned regulation and regulatory records, all that kind of stuff. To me, is gets in the way. I'm a collaboration guy. I really want people to be able to do their work and not be hindered. But it is important to talk about a number of the features that the cloud system here does have put in place. Now, again, I'm going to go back to that whole I'm an MVP, I can have an opinion perspective here. I'm going by trust, right? I'm being told that this is the truth and that the hundreds, thousands of people that work on this stuff at Microsoft are trustworthy to meet these requirements here. So the big four here that come up with regulatory compliance. The first is data privacy. So one of the reasons a lot of organizations even move to the cloud is the fact that they can retain customer control of this stuff without having to do all of the infrastructure work, the maintenance, the servers, all that kind of stuff. So this is all cloud by default. It's a the basis of the entire system here. I'm sure you've heard plenty about the the data centers, the physical security they have, the background screening. If you happen to be in the government cloud, it's even more thorough background screening. There's no, the government data centers are sovereign, they call them, because they're completely separated physically from those commercial clouds out there, because commercial clouds. But then the digital aspect to it, apparently multi-layered encryption strategy built into these systems. I just assume my data is safe. This is a multi-trillion-dollar company. They can't deal with the outcome of there being some sort of huge data breach where the world's computer, as everybody today like to call it, is leaking out to other people. So data privacy is big. Nuno mentioned the fact that Copilot, right, is not training its large language models, its LLMs, on your data. It already has the LLMs. It's pulling that from OpenAI and other services internally that they have used to tweak it to make it better to the context that they're using it for, but they're not using that internal data. That data remains yours. Transparency. It's as transparent as a proprietary product is, right? This isn't open source. There's a lot of open source references today. It doesn't sound to me, at least, but I'm just one person in the world. But this is, proprietary piece of money-making service, right? But a lot of this information about it is published on GitHub, on the capabilities of Copilot, the limitations of Copilot. And one of the comments that they kind of point out here is that it's your choice to accept or reject a Copilot recommendation, which is transparency because it lets you choose if you want it or not. Now, does that really impact your day-to-day? Probably not. Does it make you feel better about the service that you can say, no, I don't like that? When you say, no, I don't like that, it usually means it's not good enough, not that, this has offended me or something. But those transparency options are there. The third is fairness. This one is very interesting to me. Over the last few years, I've gotten much more into, the concept of accessibility and technology that works for all, essentially. Something that I was essentially as the stereotypical entitled white millennial, straight male American, in my 30s. I don't get that. I don't get that hit. I don't get hurt by that very often in my life. And this is one that was really interesting to me because as I've taken more of a view of that kind of concept, this one is interesting because they are specifically going behind the scenes to ensure that they're not going to get demographic biases, unfair outputs, or any sort of personal harm coming out of Copilot. Now, when you think about it, a lot of these large language models were built off of open internet text, right? Reddit, very famously this year, had turned off its free access to its API because basically all these LLMs had scraped it. Well, Reddit is a bastion of very great things, but also a bastion of very bad things. So these AI models are only going to mirror humanity. And humanity can be fantastic sometimes, but humanity can be awful sometimes. So the fact that they're going through and actually making sure that this stuff can be, or should be at least, representative and not in any way biased against any certain demographic, whether it's age, whether it's location on the earth, whether it's heritage, whether it's religion, whatever you want to call it. The other thing they mention here is a continuous monitoring process to evaluate these suggestions. So it's going through and it's watching itself. If you ever use Copilot or Bing Chat, you can see that sometimes it'll type something and then it'll go away because it's actually two AI services working at the same time. The one is generating the content. The other one is coming back and basically filtering that content, which is important. And then the fourth topic here is accountability. So this is another one where, how much do you trust a multi-trillion-dollar company? I like to push back every so often. Some of the Microsoft folks love me, some of them hate me, and it's because I'm pretty straightforward with my appreciation of, prove it to me, show it to me that you can actually do these things. And at this point, Copilot's too new for that, so I'm at this point taking them at their word. But that Copilot discussions the Copilot service is essentially documented on GitHub, that you can provide feedback on GitHub via their discussion forums, and that Copilot itself does not only accept but ask for feedback and complaints, similar to the other Office apps where you can tap that little icon in the top right that has a little person with a chat bubble to provide feedback. There's also references to regular internal reviews of Copilot to check compliance and ethical AI compliance, which it's kind of interesting because there's a lot of talk to that, but what's the walk? One thing today I noticed is that a lot of the background imagery at the keynotes was nice, airy, cool looking graphics, and at the bottom it says something like generated by AI, customized by humans, and like that's one of those examples of walking the walk where the ethical AI concept is being put into practice. Easy to put that in front of 10,000 people across the world at a conference like this. But we're hopeful to see that kind of thing also in the real world for this stuff too. All right, so Nuno, I think I'll pass back to you.
Okay, Matt. Now, a little summary to see what the language are natural that are using large language models, graph to your data using your apps and also the internet, because all the large language models also goes to the internet to understand more and to learn from that. As a summary, at these sessions, you have learned to identify the prerequisites for the Copilot, to prepare your data for the searches, to assign the licenses, depending the kind of the organization. Some informations are going back in a few months. Could be more news about the number of seats, the type of license of educations or partners or so on. We don't have more information yet. And to describe how you use your data and to understand how Copilot protects your sensitive business and how you use the isolation and access controls. And rolling out Copilot is only barely about buying licensing and turning it on. It's about to understand where are your data, who have access to the people, training people, create a program, pilot them, and then good luck, as Matt put here on the slide. Okay, if you have missed our contacts, my LinkedIn, Nuno Silva, and you can complete your learning exercises, watch videos, new skills. To all these concepts are on this learning path. Also, you have on the models to don't miss, for example, the track, machine learning, to continue the next series. And if you are going to this Learn at Ignite, we'll have some challenge, and one of the challenge are from the Copilot, and the first models are from this session. Please go to learn more, to understand all the concepts, to be prepared when you have license.
So I want to say a quick thank you for everybody for coming out today. I hope this was informative. To Nuno's point, and then a couple slides ago, this is not the Copilot part isn't hard, right? It's the how do you roll this out to people who've never used it when you've never used it yourself. So we're really excited about this. This is a major paradigm shift. I think this is one of those things that we're going to look back on in 20 years and go, wow, that was that was the internet rolling out. That was the Macintosh coming out. That was the iPhone coming out. Here is coming from an Apple device on my side, so I might be a little bit biased. But with that, I want to say the recording for this will be available in the next 48 hours. It takes a little time because they do add captions to all the videos, including translation into 17 different languages. So to my point about accessibility there, I do appreciate that, so just be patient. The slides will not be available because this is literally the learning path modules that you're going to find in Microsoft Learn. So you just want to go straight there. Save for a couple poop emojis earlier on in the session. Otherwise, it was a copy paste of that. We were just trying to provide our feedback, not feedback, but our assessment on that kind of stuff. I would like to say thank you to Michael, Mike, Sean behind the scenes, our great moderators. They were doing a fantastic job. A ton of great questions. Thank you all for submitting your questions, and thank you to those folks for responding. Again, to Olivia and Laurent, who were our producers at Microsoft. And Nuno, it's always nice to see you. I look forward to seeing you again sometime soon, and for an excuse to come to Europe. So thanks so much for working with me on this one, and it was a pleasure working with you, pal.
Yeah, thank you too.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of Ignite, and we hope to catch you at different sessions.
See you.